Alright, so for part 3 of my Pursuing 50 project here, with the season kind of really almost here, or here for a lot of other people south of me, I think it's time to start talking a little bit about spots. And this is going to be at least a 2-part video, because I want to keep them kind of short. So what I'm going to talk about today is sort of one of the reasons why some spots that look really great just never really pan out. When you're walking down the shoreline and you're sort of trying to pick out a couple places to focus on, it's easy to get overwhelmed, especially if you live in an area like I live where there's a lot of varied terrain. So there's a lot of transitions. There's a lot of places where it goes from sand to rock. There's a lot of places where it goes from cobble to boulder field. There's a lot of places where deep water and shallow water are close together. So it can be a little overwhelming because everywhere starts to look good. So one of the things that I've learned to focus on is something that my friend John Lee calls a water environment, and I think he sort of coined this phrase after spending a few years shore diving and learning that there are areas that are just better for all types of fish. And so after some intense conversation with John about these places and starting to use the same language as each other, me having never been underwater to look at what makes a spot great, and him preferring to look at these things with a mask on rather than swim a plug through it in many cases. And the thing that always seemed to come back to the forefront of the conversation was water movement. Now that may seem like a really underwhelming revelation, but I'm not talking about like a tide rip, something that you can necessarily always see on the surface. It has more to do with the terrain itself and how the sort of uniform currents that are always present in the ocean are affected by the shape of the bottom or the shape of the shoreline. As the current's moving along the shoreline, it is compressed and affected by the shape of these changes in the bottom or in the shoreline. And what happens there is it's basically just like putting your thumb over the end of the hose. If it's a giant long point that's going through a screaming tide, then yeah, that's like putting your thumb almost all the way over the hose. And you're going to get like a really pronounced rip, and there's probably going to be 12 boats and 4 kayaks drifting through there. But as you go into these lesser places, or places that don't make a surface disturbance, they're under 5-6 feet of water, it's like putting your thumb just halfway on the hose, but it's still speeding up the water. And it's still having this effect that I think a lot of people forget to consider, and that is that it's stirring up the bottom. So where you can go along long stretches of beach and find that almost maybe 90% of what's there is useless to the fisherman. The only possible way you're going to connect with a fish in a lot of these desert areas is if it's you get lucky and there's a transient school crossing, or if there's an anomaly, like a big school of bait comes in that wouldn't normally be there and draws fish into an area where they wouldn't ordinarily be. The name of the game with what I'm trying to do and with what I'm trying to teach you how to do and what I try to focus on is consistency. I try to find places that are going to consistently produce results. And so thinking about this water environment and how the water moving across something that changes the way the current moves, changes its speed, changes its direction in some cases, these are the types of things that are the building blocks to make one spot stand out among all of these other places on the shore that are mediocre or just completely terrible. So what's happening in these instances is that the water is moving along the shoreline. It's being affected by what it's encountering, this anomaly, be it a point or an underwater hump or whatever it is. It's compressing the uniform current and making it speed up. What happens with that is it starts to churn things up off the bottom. So you're getting all of these microorganisms that are being kicked up out of the silt or out of the weeds or out of the rocks. And then there's things that are a little bit bigger than them that are feeding on those. And there's things that are a little bit bigger than those that are feeding on those. And then there's the crabs that are feeding on the next thing. And then there's small bait fish that are also, so you're basically you're beginning the food chain. And so when you start to think of it that way, and you start to look at bottom anomalies as something that is worth targeting, you're building the foundation for finding a spot that has what it takes to produce multiple big fish per season, instead of fishing decent spots and waiting to get lucky. So next week I'm going to take it to the next level, and we're going to discuss some of the things that these spots need to attract a really big fish. So stay tuned for that, because I think that's the thing that's really got the power to change the way you look at all this stuff.